digital pollution is, which we define as unwelcome digital distractions. And we all know what those are. That's garbage outreach on LinkedIn. If you're creating this digital pollution, you have to know that this is more consequential for your business than ever before. On the other hand, digital pollution is pervasive. It is everywhere. It's in the hateful comment threads. It's in the geopolitical manipulation of people's minds through. I don't want people to feel like they can't do anything about it. This is something we can do something about every single day in our lives. And it's going to have more of an effect than throwing your number 2 or 3 or 4 into the recycle bin, even if you can't remember which one.
Welcome to Smart Chickens, a creative B2B SaaS podcast where we try to hatch and explore new innovative demand strategies to drive revenue. In our episodes, we have authentic, non-scripted conversations with B2B SaaS founders and leaders, where we cover deep dives into their professional journeys and uncover the strategies they use or follow in building and working within high-growth SaaS companies.
Ethan Beute, Chief Evangelist at BombBomb. Welcome to the Smart Chickens podcast. It's a podcast dedicated to SaaS companies that are growth leaders in their space, either creating a category or creating demand towards a category. And that certainly fits into the bucket for BombBomb and what you've been doing with your leadership team there at BombBomb. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the thought you put into preparing for this conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, I know that I could, spend hours talking to you about all things digital marketing, and sort of everything that BombBomb represents with video messaging and B2B. But I want to really go right into the heart of the matter, which is you guys are on the cusp of creating, I think, a new category around something we all probably have tinkered around, but don't really know what it is. And now you guys named it. So digital pollution and the book. Tell us a little bit about sort of the origin behind that. What led you guys to sort of hone in on that?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, it's been really fun. So I think you'll find this interesting. So Steve Passanelli, who is my longtime friend and team member, our chief marketing officer here at BombBomb, he and I co-authored a book a couple of years ago called Rehumanize Your Business. And it is essentially the complete what, why, who, when, how, why of personal video messages, videos in email, videos in Slack, videos in LinkedIn messages, et cetera. Like, how do we do that? Why do we do that? Who should do it? When do you do it? Et cetera. And periodically, off and on, since that time, we would playfully offer to each other, hey, man, I know what the second book's going to be. And I knew when he said it about a year ago that he really meant it. And the idea was, we knew that it is more challenging, more expensive, more time consuming to get attention than ever before. We know that trust is more fragile than ever, especially digital trust. It's hard to build and quick to break. And we know that, we don't talk about the pandemic in this new book, but, informed by the fact that we were in it, we knew that everyone was showing up on camera. There's obviously been growth in the video, email, and video messaging community, although not as fast as I would have expected or liked. Frankly, I think everyone should be doing it sometime, and not just for the benefit of me and our company and all of that, but because it's just better. And we can get into that maybe later, but better than sending text in so many cases, faceless typed out text in particular. So Steve's idea at the time was, okay, we know everyone's turning their cameras on, but mostly they're just showing up, and we can't afford that. It's not good enough. It doesn't go far enough. So he thought, let's handpick, 8 or 10 or 12 experts that we know have something to say on this topic, that are kind of philosophically aligned with us, invite them into deep conversations, and then turn it into something. And I was like, okay, great. So we built our list. We got people to say yes. We started doing our deep research on them, like listening to their podcasts, reading their books, reading their blog posts, and then customizing our kind of core interview question set for each person, and then doing these interviews somewhere as much as 2 hours long. And then, of course, some follow up back and forth after that. So that was the core concept for this book, Human-Centered Communication, a business case against digital pollution. At the same time, a team inside BombBomb, a cross-functional team that specifically left Steve and I out so that marketing wasn't, over-indexed in this group, was going at this category concept. We know that we sell, at one level, it's easy to say we sell video messaging software, and we do. But we've known for a long time, through our own practice and through all of our customer relationships and stories and things, that it was about a lot more. And so this team set off to explore, like, what are we really trying to do here? What is really important about what we do? And that's when they arrived at this language of human-centered communication. And, core principle being applying the ideas of human-centered design. So anchoring in something somewhat familiar. It's a 30-year-old practice or so, but applying that to our digital, virtual and online messages and experiences and all these other things we're creating to engage people. And so that was happening at the same time. So I had the distinct pleasure of figuring out how to blend these things together. And fortunately, we interviewed the right people who see the world similarly to us. And it was not a stretch in any fashion to make all of these conversations and this idea of human-centered communication as an antidote to this, at some level, crime, at another level, annoyance, frustration, confusion of digital pollution.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Give us some background, what the true north was with your chief marketing officer. I read through the first chapter and I found it interesting. I'm gonna pull a quote that I thought was a bit telling, right? So, we're living in this sort of, and you guys wrote it as, we have unwelcome digital distractions costing us time, revenue, and relationships. And so I know there's quantitative data behind that, both from what you guys have done over the years with BombBomb and from the research and the people you interview. But I guess, what are some of those, qualitative stats that kind of really got you at sort of a, maybe a, wow, aha, I didn't, like an aha moment when you were doing this research for the book? Is there any that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll approach that kind of in a generalized sense. So digital pollution as which we define as unwelcome digital distractions. And we all know what those are. That's garbage outreach on LinkedIn. That's total spam email. And sometimes it's even when you get caught in a text messaging chain sending, or a LinkedIn messaging chain where like there are 18 people in it, but you're like, dude, you could have just reached out to me directly. I don't need to know. It's not relevant to, this isn't even a conversation. So we shouldn't all be replying all in this scenario. And so across that range, you have innocent digital pollution, which again is just kind of the silly, annoying, frustrating. It's the autocorrect, it's the typo. Sometimes it's super embarrassing for you as the sender, like, oh my gosh, I did not mean to say that. That came across totally the wrong way. Right. That's innocent. There's no malintent there. On the far other end, and this is where they're just mountains and mountains of stats. And we use some of them in the first couple of chapters of the book. This is spam, phishing, malware, cyber attacks. It's given rise to a multi-billion-dollar and fast-growing cybersecurity industry.
Right, and, like ransomware, right?
Yeah, absolutely, ransomware, totally. So all this stuff, and it's in the headlines constantly too. And so they're just like, if you want to look, growth in spam texting, spam phone calls, this filtering now that iOS is doing, that our phone carriers are providing. The most common caller on my iPhone is spam likely. That's what T-Mobile calls it. And so,
mine says the same thing. I have T-Mobile as well, and it's spam, right? So my kids will like look at my phone, and they know when they see spam, if they took my phone to play like a whatever, watch a video game or something like that, or just take it from daddy, they already know automatically that spam means hit the red button. So it's funny that you say that. But yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, man, no problem. So the point in what you offer there is that everyone has stories and examples and ideas, and some of it ranges from super crazy dangerous on one end to kind of silly and frustrating and accidental on the other. But where we need to focus our attention and where we spend a lot of time in the book is in this big fat middle. And we call this consequential digital pollution. Your goal isn't to hack someone's machine or steal their data and then try to ransom it back to them. You're just trying to create and deliver value, but there's something about the way you're going about it that is confusing, frustrating, annoying, unwelcome. You feel maybe like an interruption rather than in an invitation. And the sad thing is you don't get to define it. The recipient does this. And we talk a lot about context in here too. Matthew Sweezy from Salesforce wrote a fantastic book called The Context Marketing Revolution. He was included in this book, and kind of talk about some of the important contextual factors, and it's kind of too much nuance for this conversation, but people receiving the messages and experiences you're creating get to decide in the moment whether or not they like it. Now, two big consequences. One, if you are creating either through selfishness, greed, carelessness, or just because you just reached the wrong person on the wrong day and too bad for you. If you're creating this digital pollution, you have to know that this is more consequential for your business than ever before.
Yes.
And by that, I mean, one click, someone can block not just your email address, they can block your entire domain. So if your sales team is reaching out to a whole set of people, like in a really focused, aggressive, total addressable market, and they're not doing it in a stylish way, they're not doing it in a relevant way, they're
Authentic.
not doing it. Yeah, they'll, not only will that rep's email address potentially get marked for abuse or spam, they can block your entire domain, and that entire company, your entire company can no longer reach that person, or perhaps even no one at their domain. And so, and then negative word of mouth, we've all seen, for those of us that spend time on LinkedIn, we've all seen people kind of blur out the face, blur out the name and say, look how terrible this is.
Yeah, I love those posts, by the way, Ethan, because we all have been on the receiving end, and might incidentally or the innocent part. Like, I know you guys have 3 types, which I love how you guys have it defined in the book as innocent, consequential, and intentional pollution, right? So on that consequential side, your point is absolutely valid, and we've seen those blurred out. Hey, like as soon as I connected, all of a sudden I got a little white paper that was sent to me that's 8 paragraphs deep, and you're like, I haven't even said hello, right? So I 100% agree. What I want to get to this is something that I think is sort of a little heady, but it goes into a lot of what you guys have spent researching, I'm sure, which is we went from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution. And in the industrial revolution, pollution as we know it, the actual physical pollution of water, the air, was manifested. And we've all lived through it over the last, 18th, 19th century. An interesting article on the Washington Monthly was written in February of 2019. So this is sort of like literally, the gist, the start of the pandemic that we're all living through, right? And it focuses on something, the world is choking on digital pollution.
Oh, that's the one from Judy Estrin, right?
Yes, and it dovetails right into what you guys have now created into this wonderful book that I think has a lot of insights to those of us who are living in this B2B world, but also have to live the B2C world, because we're also consumers. We're not just, we don't just have our B2B titles. We actually go into the real world. And I think the consequences on the B2B, like you said, are absolutely correct. You can impact and be put on a honeypot, do not, spammy list, and kills it for everybody in your team. But also on the kind of societal side of things, which I think as a business, you're also making a societal impact. Oftentimes, it's not your end goal, your quarterly goal per se, but it does come into effect, right? This is just hear this, and I know that you read this already, but here's what they say. They go, now we are confronting a new and alarming byproduct on the progress, meaning progress of our digitalization of the world. And the stakes for our planet may just be as high as when they were during the Industrial Revolution. If the steam engine and blast furnace heralded our movement into the industrial age, computers and smartphones now signal our entry into the next age, and have been, right? One defined not by physical production, but the ease of services provided through commercial internet. In this new age, names like Zuckerberg, Bezos, Brin, and Page are new Carnegie's, Rockefellers, and Ford. And so what are we as an industry, and I see you guys are spearheading this, quite honestly, saying, let's name it, let's call out the pink elephant in the room. There is a digital pollution, reality that's happening, right? And how do we get control of that? That's what I think that I got from what I've read, and what I really enjoy is that you guys are putting a name on it. You're putting stake on the ground as a company, saying there's a better way. And this better way is what you guys describe in the book. Am I a little bit off in highlighting industrial revolution to the knowledge economy revolution and the digital pollution that we're all living in? Because we all get flooded inboxes. We all get, people from all sorts of the country and world asking us to connect on LinkedIn without even having seen one iota of what you posted and engage with you to any degree. So is this sort of a good, comparison, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. There are so many directions I could take this. And I love that you found that piece. It's funny when identified this idea of digital pollution. And so like that sounds like a good name. People seem to get it. We tested it internally. We tested it with family and friends. Like when I say that, what does it conjure? What does it mean to you? Does it make sense? And then when you start talking about examples, everyone has like 10 or 20 examples they can share right away. Just like you and I did. Like you didn't even have to try. You're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. And so, yes. And my only fear in it is that, like environmental pollution, I am of the mind that any poisoning of our air, water, and soil is a poisoning of us, right? And I think it feels sometimes too big to deal with. I think we're often blind to it. I think, especially in the Western developed world, those of us of sufficient means, like people who are fortunate enough to be able to have podcast conversations and people that can afford to get on a Peloton or a treadmill or a hiking trail and listen to podcasts and worry about things besides their immediate health and their immediate safety and that of their family and their friends. Like those of us who are privileged to live in this type of a world, we typically live far enough away from pollution that we don't have to deal with it that much. On the other hand, digital pollution is pervasive. It is everywhere. It's in the hateful comment threads. It's in the geopolitical manipulation of people's minds through social media. We don't get into that in the book, but that's, Judy Estrin definitely touches on that in that really smart piece. And frankly, her piece, is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. The World is Choking on Digital Pollution. Judy Estrin, Estrin, for folks who are listening.
Yeah, we'll put it on the show notes, but absolutely, you're awesome. Right on that.
So she was the only one to write a piece that substantial. Most of our other Google searches around, like, is this a thing? Is anyone else talking about this? Everything else is typically around how much environmental pollution all of our servers and data processing and intense computing create in the world. Bitcoin is an easy go-to there. Mining is obviously insanely energy intensive. And so how do we rig these data centers up to more renewable energy, et cetera? So that's one thing. I don't want people to feel like they can't do anything about it. This is something we can do something about every single day in our lives. And it's going to have more of an effect than throwing your number 2 or 3 or 4 into the recycle bin, even if you can't remember which one your recycling provider actually takes.
Yeah, that's a really valid point.
Business culture. We can take over business culture by changing our behavior.
I like that you've sort of defined that so that folks do not get confused. I agree that, with what you describe in the book and sort of the steps or the methodology that you guys are describing to do this, there is a route or a path to control, maybe not eliminate completely, because I think, like just anything, that, Rome wasn't built in a day. So we got into this mess 20 years ago with good intentions. I mean, I don't need to point to you the fact that last year Netflix did a documentary on the social dilemma. So we've got literally founders of these, I won't call them culprits, but let's say the social fabric of the internet that we all live in and our kids live on and everybody lives on globally. They get it. They understand that they might have created a monster, and this distraction or digital pollution that comes from it is ripping us apart at a business level, because you might belong to 5 Slack groups. I know that you and I both share a community called Peak. I want to be mindful of my peers and respond, but there's just so much you could do in a day, right? I mean, I have literally right now maybe 9 or 10 tabs opened. That's just my reality, right? I'm not complaining, mind you. I'm just saying that for us in the knowledge economy, this is a new world that we live in, right? The new world order is, how quickly can we engage or not, and how distracted are we because we might want to engage too much, right? So I listen, I'm a living, and I know you are too, because we do podcasts and we are in communities and all that. It comes with our territory. But having said that, I think that you guys have taken a very reflective point of view and have internalized it to the degree of, let's write a book about it. Let's get really heady people that are also in this space that understand the ramifications, if you will, of us going down this route, which is, I think there's an oversaturation of insta everything. We want insta reply. We want, we want to feel we're connected through technology, but it's sort of a oxymoron. We're actually getting a lot of disconnect because our distraction is so high that we think we might be more productive because we have 5 groups we belong to. We're, we're constantly checking in. We're doing all this. And before you know it, it's like, holy crap, it's 6 o'clock. I got to take the kids to soccer practice. Did I do anything today? Or was I just like a passerby, chiming in here or there and really not doing anything? So I love that your focus is on this is real, us in B2B, and even, just in regular life, we're living this. So talk to me about this a problem. Now talk to me a little bit about the solution, right? So problem solution. What are some of the solutions that the book unveils?
Yeah, I want to acknowledge one key thing in what you offered there, which is, any of these tools, and we really hit this hard in the closing chapter of the book, which I think is one of the more interesting and provocative. I think the ones that preceded are a lot, this sweet blend of philosophical and practical and tactical. So I will speak to some of that in just a moment. But, these tools, just like the printing press, way back in the day, these tools can be used for good or for bad. All they are tools. And so they don't necessarily have, and now I'm getting into something that is potentially ripe for a very intellectual debate, but these tools don't necessarily really want anything for themselves. Now, to the social dilemma, they can be engineered to be more attractive and to push the dopamine buttons inside people's brains so that we keep pushing the buttons on our phones so we can produce more data, so they can track us better and feed us more information. So there's a lot of that going on in the background. My high level point is, all of us have agency, and this was part of what you were offering. All of us have agency over how we spend our time, how we spend our attention, where we focus, how deep we want to go versus how wide we want to go, what we want to get done in a day, and how we want to reach out to people. Do we want to reach out to people in a way where we approach it through this mindset? What words do I need to say to get someone to do what I want them to do? And this is kind of marketing on people or at people versus connecting with people, communicating with people, influencing people, creating value-oriented offers and legitimate conversations for people. And in that latter kind of mindset, where we see it as helping more than we do selling, where we see creating impact in people's lives is a precursor to revenue. We don't go out and say, like, what do I need to do to get the revenue? We go out and we say, what can we do to make an impact in this potential customer's life such that they can't help but be a source of recurring revenue for our organization because we continue to provide them recurring impact, right? And frankly, that's how it works. And so anything that we do that kind of betrays this basic idea is kind of like pouring poison into our own water supply. It only hurts us if we approach things this way with this in mind, that revenue is a consequence of creating value or impact or benefit in people's lives and businesses, then it just goes better. And I know that's not genius. Everyone's would nod and go like, yeah, of course, stupid. But we don't act that way.
That's
and so
true.
we take a lot of that on in the book. And so a couple things. One, we do talk a lot about video with a lot of these people, but we don't talk about it because we're advocating for video specifically. We're talking about video because it closes a huge gap. And then I'll give it back to you after this one kind of important idea. Human-centered communication, as I said, takes the principles of human-centered design, which blends 3 things: desirability, what humans actually want; feasibility, what technology enables; and then the third one is viability, what business success is based in or what the business needs. And I think too often when we look at our sales and marketing communication in particular, we're not operating at the intersection of those 3 things. Instead, we're more operating at the intersection of what the business needs and wants and what technology allows. And what winds up there is over-automated, impersonal, sometimes unsolicited. It lacks personality from our people, which is sometimes dehumanizing to them. It's like, send this email that we wrote for you. Don't use video. And if you do, you have to use this exact script. We're removing people's own agency to customize and to tailor and to be personal and inject themselves into it. And there's just an irony there in that, A, that absolutely leaves out the desirability piece, what people want. People want to feel connected. People want to feel trust. People want to feel secure. People want to feel engaged, et cetera. And so when we operate too much with an efficient, I'm calling this the intersection of the business need and the technological capabilities as kind of this hardcore efficiency play. And what's missing is the effect, and we're not saying, we're not all in or all out on this. We're not moralizing this. We're just calling for more of a balance, which is, let's think more about desirability. Let's think about, why would someone open your email? Why would someone play your video? Why would someone click your calendar link and schedule something with you, as opposed to, what do I need to do to get them to do this? It's, what's in it for them at a really simple level. And in that way, we're kind of moving to the center of that triangle, because we're including more of those human needs, the desirability of it. And so I think if we approach more of our work that way, and this is where I was going initially, when we look at most of our touch points, it's faceless communication. It's either faceless typed out text, faceless voicemails. Very few people are answering our phone for the main reason you and I talked about before, which is spam likely, or I don't recognize the number. Like, that's a setting on my iPhone. If that number is not in my contact book, don't ring my phone. I don't care. And if they do leave a voicemail, I may or may not listen to it. So anyway, point is, all of it's faceless. And the problem is, your buyers care more, just like any other human being, by the way, anyone in your life cares more about your intent than anything else. And by intent, I mean, what is your motivation? Why me? Why now? Do you have my best interests in mind? Can I trust you? Like, what is your intent in reaching out to me? And I think all of our BS detectors or selfishness detectors or greed detectors are finely enough tuned that we can smell selfishness a mile away. But the problem is, when we reach out in a faceless manner and we're not incorporating video into some of our outreach, they can't sense intent. If you are sincere, if you have real value, if you have done your homework, if you actually have something useful for somebody and you're excited to share it with them because you know it's going to help them, you know it's going to create positive impact in their life or their work, then include some video, because that intent is written all over your face. It's written all over your body. It's all through your voice and your tone and your pace, and it cannot be mistaken. And so this idea of hiding behind a keyboard or hiding behind a pre-recorded voicemail, you're only poisoning your own drinking water.
I love it. And listen, 100%, 1000% agree that you've got to have that human-centered model that you just described is right now skewed to automation. And, you know, we've kind of created our own problem, right? So MarTech has grown exponentially to the point where, you know, we're more like augmented marketers, because we have such sophisticated AI to the 10th degree on cadence and personalization. But then we forget that personalization token is an F name, you know, after like an email sequence, right? It's like, what can you do to really connect with people? You know, it reminds me of when I was in college, one of my favorite courses was sociology. And I remember in a sociology class, a professor talked about the triad, that us as humans, you know, back to our ancestral primitive state, were better in threes. And and also like the dyad and triad were like the perfect number of people communication back in the day when we're drawing in caves. And it was actually communication, right? So what I liken that to now with your triad that you're describing, not triad, sorry, that your framework, is that personalization more than ever has to be real. And because of our maybe, you know, sort of limitations now through the pandemic and how much is conference versus virtual, et cetera, this tool that we all have now through the internet, video messaging, it's really just, I think, you know, one of the best tools you can use, right, to communicate. I mean, listen, I got a 75-year-old mother who now knows, because of the pandemic, how to use WhatsApp. And she reaches out to her brothers, my uncles in Ecuador, through WhatsApp camera, and she loves it. You know, she's not going to a landline. That's not going to happen. And this is my 75-year-old mother. So us in B2B can't think we're special. We're not special. Our emails aren't that great to begin with, right? B2B is becoming business, you know, it's business to business, looking like boring. But that's because we are on our worst enemies when we automate for efficiency purposes, like you said. Because I think we're living in a world in B2B where we're so KPI driven that we forget that there are other human beings that are part of that database list, right? So, we can get into a whole tangent around ABM and how to not be fishing in a pond, of sharks with the wrong fishing gear, right? You're looking at how do you get your, service addressable market, not even TAM, that's even too big now. It's like, how do you focus on who you really want to talk to with and why? Are you adding value and how are you humanizing it? I love companies like yours, like Alcy, who's doing this whole, forget about the 9 to 5, think about their 5 to 9, right? If, by the way, as way of this conversation, if anyone wants to sell me anything, you just talk about soccer, Barcelona, Messi, Juventus, any of them a little bit before your spiel, and I will more than likely respond, and maybe I'll even buy from you, right? Because I could tell that you went deep enough in either my Facebook or whatever social media that's public out there to know that I'm a soccer nerd, football nerd. And I think to your point, we all have that opportunity now because that tool set exists. The automation, AI tools, marketing, whatever you want to call them, they exist, right? It's that third part that you're talking about that is missing. And I think, it's fixable. It really is. It's how would you want to, you got to put yourself in like an empathetic state, I think. How would you like to be communicated to, sold to, right? Do you want to get a cold email out of the blue offering you XYZ that has nothing to do with what you do? Or would you rather someone actually ask something about a conference they saw you attended, talk to you about a post that you did, right? To see and show true engagement and actually have sort of that primitive tribal, I'm talking to you. We're about to go out of this cave and hunt a huge saber-toothed tiger. How can we help each other? Help. Again, not sell, right? So I love that you're talking about it's a new paradigm shift, which is not selling, but helping. If you come with a perspective of I'm helping you or I'm trying to help you, we may not be a fit right now, but maybe in the future, at least I'm here. I'm genuinely trying to help you. And if we help each other and it's a win-win, awesome. I think we're losing sight of that sometimes because it's a bit of a trap, I think. We get stuck in this KPI-driven world. You've got a title and a company that has quarterly goals to meet, right? And so many of them do. And what happens, I believe, is that we're so quick to think about doing the Wall Street waltz quarter to quarter that we forget the bigger picture, which is what brand affinity, what community are we building? And how are we authentically coming as our true selves to these conversations? Because, Ethan, you're a person. At the end of the day, I know you have a family. I know that you're very passionate about certain subjects. I'd rather approach you about that. And if that turns into something that becomes a win-win for us business-wise, great. I think we always try to shove our agenda. And part of that, I think, is as leaders, we got to recognize that and say, okay, let's full stop. What are we doing here, right? Are we solving a problem or are we selling widgets? Like Christopher Lockett cracks me up because he always talks about this. He talks about if you think you're going to be a product-led business and sell the next widget, it's a race to the bottom. You're not adding value. You're not creating a category. You're not actually solving a problem. And so you get ahead of yourself. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of B2B companies have. I would say the majority, right? And I would dare to say that right now, we also have a very, just sort of, the VC community is sort of feeding into this. The valuations of companies these days, and granted, I applaud them. These, Dave Cancel drifted an awesome unicorn company just now. It was, yesterday, I think it was announced to the world. Awesome. That's great. But I think as the stakes get higher, automation and efficiency becomes higher. And all of a sudden, the origins of these companies, which were a little bit more personalized or what have you, start going away. And I'm not picking on Drift. I'm just saying this could be anyone. Gong, Outreach, anybody, right? Salesforce. And that's the challenge. I also think right now, Ethan, you and I both are, at least I'm in my 40s. I got gray hair. You can't see it. Sorry.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. I lived like what Christopher Lockett likes to call the analog digitals. So we lived pre-internet. Fax was like a tremendous accomplishment back in our days to what we have now, right? Our millennial middle managers who will soon will be decision makers, right? Or sitting on boards even right now, or dreaming up the next Facebook, Google, or whatever's coming next, TikTok, who knows? They're digital natives. So they think differently. They probably would embrace communication via video a hell of a lot more because that's just how they're hardwired. So, again, I think that we have the right tools. We just sort of have the wrong, outcomes because of where we put our goals, right? And so it all starts from the top. And I know that Ethan, your company for some time now has been, working and thinking of how do you change that change management, because it becomes change management, right? How do you get an organization that's on a legacy sort of marketing sales stack alignment? Like, we've got to hit our numbers. BDR XYZ, are you not hitting 100 calls cold? Why? Right? We got to get away from that to how did you impact someone today? Did you connect with one person in a real meaningful way today? And how do we make that, how do we turn that into a KPI? And that's a harder sell when you get to publicly traded companies where it's all about the numbers and shareholder value, right? So for those private companies that can sort of still get away with like what you are getting away with, writing these provocative books, thinking outside the box, I think you and companies like BombBomb push the envelope. And it's a hard discussion to have, as you know, internally, to say, hey, our numbers I know are around metrics, but can we do away a little bit with so much emphasis to marketing attribution of MQLs to SQLs? Can we just stop for a minute and figure out a new acronym, if we want to call everything an acronym, on, potential buyer by influence because of human connection? Like, how can we, question for you, how can we start shaping the dialogue, the conversation, the mentality at the C levels? Because the consumer's already there. The consumer already smells it a mile away, like you said. So why do we think that they don't? It's beyond me.
So much good stuff there. Okay, a couple key ideas. One, we're not necessarily proposing that that you redefine your KPIs necessarily. You could actually keep them all and just approach how you're achieving them in a way that is more service oriented, perhaps. One thing that several people in the book talked about, I'm thinking of Lauren Bailey, who is the founder and president of both Factor 8 and of Girls Club, and Mario Martinez Jr., who is the founder and CEO and modern sales evangelist at Vengresso. They both talk a lot about outcomes over activities. And because you hit that, right? So, because we do need to achieve our numbers, we need to have a plan. We need to deliver on the plan. What we're saying is you can deliver to the plan and probably do it in a way that's going to increase retention and expansion when you operate more with other people's best interest in mind. And so, if you do want to modify what you're measuring daily or what you're calling day-to-day success, knowing that, it takes X number of weeks or months to close a deal and it needs to move through the pipeline at a particular rate, et cetera, is to focus on the outcomes. Like what is the purpose of those activities? And this is just a general caution. Again, I'm glad you used the word provocative because that's the whole goal. We're not like saying you're doing it wrong, this is the right way to do it. It's there's a better way. Here are some ways to think about that. What do you think about these ideas and what might you change? And so one approach there is, again, like, what are the outcomes we desire and what are the things that lead up to that outcome? What happens when we focus too much on the activities instead of the outcome is that we lose sight of what the real goal is. The goal is the outcome. And instead we're hammering people and, lighting fires under people for underachieving on the thing that doesn't actually matter. We think it specifically correlates to this outcome. And it has maybe on average over the last X number of people over the past X amount of time. But the outcome is what we really want. And so if we can maybe liberate people a little bit, give them a little bit more creative freedom, a little bit more, use more of their intuition, use a little bit more of the expertise that they're developing, to use a little bit more of their personality, they can probably design ways to achieve the outcome that beat this hard to find system or process that has all these necessary, probably overdone checkpoints on the way to the outcome. Okay, so that's one big idea. One of the reasons, another thing you said that is really important, you introduced the Industrial Revolution off the beginning. I think we're only 200 years removed from its onset, and we're only 100 and some years removed from Henry Ford's assembly line. So we have to think about what that means from a business culture standpoint. We're still in this kind of mechanized, sequential, it's still somehow interesting for people to post on LinkedIn a diagram of what the buyer's journey actually is. And it's got arrows going in every direction, and sometimes backward movement, forward movement, double jumps forward, triple steps backward. Like, that's the reality. And yet we're still structured as organizations as this assembly line of marketing kind of tees it up. They kind of help. There's some kind of a handoff to sales. Sales accelerates it. If necessary, we might put it back on a conveyor belt for marketing to work till it comes back through sales and it hands off into customer success. And then, like, we're still structured in this way, even though we all know the reality. None of us buys that way. We've all had deals like where we say, like, let's say the average time to close this deal in particular is 90 days, but it closes in 90 minutes or 9 days or something like dramatic. But we've also seen it take 18 months. And so like, this is the reality. And so I know we need to design systems for predictable outcomes and all of that. But I think to lose sight of the immeasurables and their value and influence on buying decisions, to lose sight of the art that is required, the necessary balance of art and science. And a number of people talk about that balance in the book as well. To be overly scientific, to be overly industrial in our approach, to be overly industrial in our communication, it just doesn't fit today. And so let's call back. And I'll even kind of challenge your idea of the influence of age on some of this stuff. It's definitely there for sure, but I want to go back farther to what markets were like 1,000 years ago. They were noisy. They were sensational, sights, sounds, smells. There's a transparency and an authenticity there. If someone is selling nectarines at this particular stall, and someone 2 stalls down is also selling nectarines that look a little bit bigger and a little bit more ripe, and they're less expensive, we can talk about that. Hey, dude, what's good? Do you see what's going on down here? And we can talk about this. We can, it's just, it was very, very human. It was all conducted in a human voice, not a corporate voice. It was, and so, and you even see that today, there's this, we'll pay more for what is truly artisan. We'll pay more for what a craftsperson has actually touched, as opposed to what's come off a machine 1,000 copies at a time. Like, and so there's a human desirability for this connection, for story, for trust, for transparency, for understanding, for approachability. And I think that transcends culture. I think it transcends race. I think it transcends gender. I think it transcends time. This is a deep human need. And to put it in today's context, the technology is amazing for this. We can learn a lot more about people. We can understand people. We can track their behavior in a way that allows us to help them better instead of just be more sneaky. They're like, and again, I don't mean to be too moralistic about this, because different people can approach it in different ways. But if we are going to be successful, we need to come in spirit of service, because that's what people are going to respond to. And that comes in all of our digital messages and experiences. And it comes ultimately in the buying, yes. And it ultimately, because all of us, we need to be honest with ourselves, we're all in some form of a subscription-based model. For those of us that sell software, it truly is. We sell X number of seats to this account on an annual basis. We want to renew it. We want to expand it, et cetera. But even if you're not directly that way, of course, there's repeat and referral business, which is a form of subscription. And by that, I just mean, again, this concept of recurring impact. If we can keep creating positive impact in someone's life and business, then they'll keep coming back to us, even if it's not on a renewal basis. And they'll keep bringing other people and sending people along with us. They'll leave positive reviews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things we know all these things.
Well, man, there are so many good golden nuggets you just dropped, Ethan. I think the audience is going to love it, because, a lot of them sound so kind of obvious. But what's not obvious is that we don't execute on the obvious, right? So that, I love your analogy of the markets. I recently helped my wife open a business in a mall. She's got an online store, but also she wanted to try. So I'm literally doing this whole market analogy you said. to help her out this first couple of weeks. And the skill of being able to communicate face to face, to bring someone in to see what you're selling, which she sells artisan goods, actually, believe it or not, it's almost like a perfect analogy. People want to know, they want to communicate. How did you do those dream catchers? Oh, her soy organic candles, right? And I find myself being a storyteller, and proudly so, telling the story of how my wife does this. And I don't know how she's got the patience to be like in the kitchen, cooking oil, soy milk to turn into soap, et cetera, et cetera. People want to connect. People, regardless if that's a B2B, not a B2C, not a software company, at the end of the day, that buyer on the other side of the B2B does not want to feel that they're on a conveyor belt. I love that analogy you put. It's true. We have created this sort of conveyor belt industrial revolution, kind of like, okay, here comes the handoff sales. We even have acronyms for it. Here's the SLA that we agreed on, and here comes my MQL to your SQL. Are you ready for it? Please don't drop the ball, because the KPI of our quarterly earnings depends on you. And I don't want them to take budget from my, CMO. So we get so caught up with that sort of industrial, kind of like pass the ball now to the next guy, that we forget about the human element. And I love what you're saying and what you're bringing to the table with this book, as well as what I believe is true. Video, listen, when MTV came out, remember MTV killed the radio? Well, video killed everything else, I think. Video, honestly, right now, especially the world we're living in, is sort of a bit of it's not a necessity. It's a must-have. You must have video right now to communicate, because we are, maybe not being able to travel to certain places, having restrictions. And even if we didn't, I think that the world in the knowledge economy could have done this acceleration, quote unquote, of Zoom meetings. And we could have done this even before the pandemic, quite frankly. And some companies that were maybe forward thinkers were already doing it. Having remote teams. Pre-pandemic,
we had something like 50,000 customers using our active paying customers, mind you, because we lose some along the way. Some people start free trials, but don't see it through. 50,000 active paying customers or more at the onset of the pandemic. And some of them have been using it for years. And it's because it's like these in-between moments. Like, we might see each other in person a couple of times a year, but when I want to convey that message and make sure that I get the emotion or tone correct, whether I'm providing corrective feedback to a direct report prior to our one-on-one that's coming up in 3 days, but this message can't wait, or whether it's checking in to say hello, or thank you, or good job, or congratulations, or hey, I just saw that on LinkedIn, and I know I liked it and I commented, but I wanted to reach out personally and, extend, further well wishes, or whatever the case may be. Like, there are all these moments to break down complex and detailed information by talking in layperson's terms, or even by screen recording, walking and talking through a contract or a proposal, introducing yourself so that, you may never meet this person, or you may not meet them for another 2 or 3 years, but they can still feel like they know you.
Yes.
And so the act of doing it alone right now is differentiating, but ultimately, if you see this exclusively as kind of an attention play or a prospecting play, or this is the new thing kind of a play, you're going to approach it. You're approaching it with the wrong mindset, because this is for all humans, especially working in a professional capacity, for so many moments throughout our days and our weeks and our months where typed out text, or getting really intellectual and trying to capture what we're thinking and feeling in words and sentences and paragraphs, and hoping we did it well enough, and hoping people will actually read it, and hoping that they'll understand what we actually meant by it, versus just hitting record and being the message, being on emotion, and not just getting I'm air quoting here for folks that aren't seeing video, this idea of saying the right words in the right order it's not nearly as important. Again, going back to this idea of intent, the spirit with which we're communicating, as long as you actually mean what you're saying, you can't really do any better than video than being in person. So my kind of between the lines caution there is, if you are insincere, if you are operating from a bit of a greedy or selfish mindset, and even if it's not aggressive, it's like out of desperation, like end of the month, oh my gosh, I need to throw a Hail Mary. I need to go do a bunch of activities. That's going to come through in the video. So I would caution you, if you're not sincere, a video might not be the right move for you in the moment.
Right. Well, listen, everything you said, I loved it. And unpacking that a little bit, from my experience, I agree 1000% that you got to come across authentic, like know who your audience is, right? Like, and absolutely, even though we all have Grammarly and it might save us from like a misspelled, the intent never is shown on text. I have a remote team. Some are in South America and Ecuador, where I'm from, and they love WhatsApp. They love WhatsApp, right? Like email is like, yeah, they'll use it, but WhatsApp is their main choice, right? So it was a change management for me to understand that that's how they want to get communicated. So what do? I do video messages to let them know what I want. And I see the efficiency on them understanding what we need, what we want, because, you know, these are digital natives pretty much that I'm working with, and they're just accustomed to that, the messaging, right? And video messaging is just that. It has been now for some time, the next evolution, right? I mean, WhatsApp, it didn't become WhatsApp and get bought by Facebook because they have something that's not working. It's obviously the choice of communication for millions around the world. So I love it because I think you guys are definitely talking about the right things at the right time. And I think to the right audience, because B2B, as much as we think we're always, you know, state of the art and the next silver bullet is like, you know, like someone's inventing that, we sometimes get stuck in that conveyor belt. And we don't think outside of the box enough, right? So I love the fact that you guys are. I know that we're coming across the hour, so out of respect of your time, and I could speak to you for hours, certainly.
Easily.
But I want to make sure that we get a little bit of this. You know, I have this kind of like rapid fire section, which puts a little bit of the human in this human-centered communication around who you are and your background. And then I'll let you obviously let us know how we can get your book. You know, I definitely want to read it. And I think a lot of people are going to, if nothing else, like you said, it's going to be provocative enough to have internal communications about what they can do better or different. So again, thanks. Let me see here. These are questions that I like to ask because I think that, you know, everyone that's in your capacity as an evangelist probably is insightful enough to think about, if you could jump back to the future on the DeLorean with Marty and Doc and speak to a younger Ethan, what would you say to him? Or would you prefer not to like change anything and, you know, just have things be as they are?
Yeah, you know, at some level, I don't operate out of regret much, but, you know, I'll honor the question because I do like it. I think the one thing I could have done differently earlier in my career, I had a very high task orientation. I wanted to get a lot done. I wanted to get it done at a high level. When I was putting in extra time and extra effort and extra hours, it was toward this kind of high task orientation. I think I underskewed in the trajectory of it. This is what I'm imagining now, the way you set the question up, how much different and better might because my life and work are amazing. I have zero complaints. It's just, it's not what I would have expected, but it's so much better in so many different ways. So I wouldn't change anything, but I wish, in the spirit of the question, that I may have had more of a relationship orientation earlier on, that I had invested time and attention and curiosity in other people and sustained that better over time. You know, I still talk with the woman who gave me my first internship in the industry I was in before, television.
Awesome.
And then she eventually hired me. I still see her whenever I go back to my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we talk a couple times a year. But there should be 20 or 30 of her in my life, and there were only like 5 or 10. And so, you know, anyway, so that's the first thing that comes to mind, more of a people orientation and less of a task orientation, more of a balance there.
I love that. That's great input and advice, you know, and I think anyone can relate to that. So as you know, and I don't need to tell you because you're a 2-time author, but I believe leaders are readers and vice versa. So outside of the books you've actually co-written, are there any books, they don't have to be business books, that have impacted your sort of point of view in business or life?
Yeah, 2 of them that I actually was privileged enough to be able to rope into the conclusion of human-centered communication. One, I believe, was written in 1995, or it was 1991, called The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken. That dramatically changed the way that I see the world. Because this is rapid fire, I won't tell you why, but it's called The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken. Another one was the Clue Train Manifesto, which started as kind of like a website. And I believe that was 1999. And another one called Small is Beautiful: Economics as If People Mattered by E.F. Schumacher. That one was written in 1973. I picked up a used copy when I was traveling in the mid 90s. And that one, kind of along with The Ecology of Commerce, dramatically affected my understanding of at some level why things are the way they are relative to what we all know would be better. So those are a few that come to mind.
I mean, I love them. I will put them on the show notes. I'll probably ping you or your assistant later to get those, but those sound very interesting. Now, is there any, look, I see you on LinkedIn, on Peak, you're legit. You're there, you're putting the time, you're putting out content that's educational, bringing in awesome guests. And I know that it takes time and effort. What do you do to unwind? Because I also know you have a family, right? So do you have an app or do you have a hobby? How does Ethan Beute just say, I'm gonna, relax and chill?
Yeah, it's usually active. My best vacation is not a sitting on the beach vacation. Like I like to move. So it's walking, running, or hiking is my primary go-to. Sometimes I'll do it with other people. Sometimes I'll do it alone. Sometimes I'll do it alone with a podcast in my ears. Sometimes I'll do it alone with music in my ears. And sometimes I think we all need a lot more silence in our lives too. And so I find like the rhythm, the repetitive motion, the blood flow, there's something really good about moving and whether it's walking, running, or hiking, that's my go-to.
That's awesome. And I know that you're in Colorado, so it's beautiful there for Colorado.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Colorado Springs or are you Denver?
It is Colorado Springs, easy access compared to Denver, which is a very, very large city. And, people mistake it as a mountain town. It's that mountains are actually, depending on where you live, as much as an hour west or sometimes even an hour and a half, depending on traffic. 5 minutes down the street from me is an open space that feeds into a park that goes up into the Pike National Forest for dozens of miles. And that's 5 minutes down the street. I can run over there or I can bike over there and, off and running. So that's beautiful. It's amazing access.
Yeah. Pikes Peak is amazing. I've been lucky enough to go a few times to Colorado Springs for business. I love Colorado Springs. First time I've eaten actually game food was in Colorado Springs. I can't recall the restaurant, but it's well known for it. It's very picturesque. And I almost, crazy enough, as I was driving my rental car there, I could have sworn I saw a couple of deers and I almost hit one. Now, Jesus, I'm about to bring dinner. But
they're sturdy, by the way. I don't know if people know what mule deer are like, but they are sturdy. You definitely don't want to hit one for a variety of reasons.
I'm sure I'm glad I didn't. I just was kind of like, here I am, a South Florida / South California guy. So, we don't see too many deers in mountains per se. So I was kind of like, oh, that's cool, right? As I was going to eat one of them. Maybe that's not the best. Yeah. But yeah, Colorado Springs and you doing that, it's awesome. I think that people that do some kind of activity outside of work that's health oriented or to their body helps absolutely with life, right, in general. And so was there anything I didn't get to that you'd like to cover, whether it's your book or anything else?
No, you're very kind in your words and your praise and thoughtful, positive feedback about what we're trying to do. You obviously understand it well. I appreciate your sensibility around the fact that these are helpful ideas at about the right time. That really means a lot as someone who, anyone who does creative work, you always wonder, like, is this going to land? Are people going to respect it? Are people going to appreciate it? Is this original enough? Is the timing right and all of that? And, you feel like it is at times, and then you feel like it's a miss other times. And so anyway, I really appreciate the level of engagement on it above all. And I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, well, likewise. So last question is, how can folks learn more about the book, order it, and, learn more about BombBomb and connect with you?
Sure. I'll start with myself. My name is Ethan Beute. Last name is spelled Beute. Find me on all the social networks, either in 2 words, like on LinkedIn, Ethan Beute, or 1 word, like on Twitter or Instagram, Ethan Beute. You can also learn more about the book. It's called Human-Centered Communication. You can go to bombbomb.com/book. Depending on when you're listening, there are a number of pre-order bonus packages that have a unique experience, of course, additional content and resources, but unique live experiences where Steve and I, my co-author, are participating directly with you and your team or your company. We've gotten a lot of the 11 experts we featured in the book to participate in a book club series, to do some interactive roundtables. And so we just want to bring this thing to life and have conversations, hopefully as fruitful and engaging and thoughtful as this one. I really, again, appreciate how much you put into it. so that people can really wrestle with these ideas and converse with others around it. And so that's bombbomb.com/book. You can go to Amazon and just search human-centered communication. And if you do decide to order or pre-order, email me, Ethan, ETHAN at bombbomb.com, and I'll send some gifts your way.
Well, excellent. Well, again, thank you for all the time for putting this book out with your CMO. I think it'll definitely resonate, Ethan. I'm not just saying that because we were together on Peak and other things, but I really think the timing is great. So I wish you nothing but the best of luck with that. I also know, sort of as a sneak peek bonus, I don't know if you want me to keep this or not on the podcast, but you're obviously your friend and colleague there is doing a docu-series potentially about this, which I'm excited to see this because
it's going to be great.
Yeah, I can just imagine. I know the type of just the type of work that you and the team and John puts out. So I'm excited for that. So I wish you guys nothing but the best with that too. So give me a little sneak peek on that, and maybe I'll have John and you on that one, and we could, deep dive into how you guys are on Netflix in a couple of years, or I don't know. but I really, really enjoyed it. Thanks again, Ethan. Again, folks, this has been a wonderful conversation with Ethan Beute, Chief Evangelist Officer at BombBomb. And make sure to follow the show notes that we'll have at the end of this episode when it's out, probably by end of the month or so that you can pre-order the book, as well as just connect with Ethan. He's a great guy. Promise you, he will not send you those 500-word like LinkedIn messages that we all hate. That I can guarantee you.
I'll send you like a 32-second video instead.
Exactly, and those are fun.
Make sure to follow and subscribe to Smart Chickens Podcast at digitechie.com/smart-chickens and all podcast channels. If you get value from our podcast content, make sure to leave a review, share, and connect with our host, Gianni Quintana, on LinkedIn.